Big Frank refused to give in to a lifestyle the world was trying to put on him. Big Frank lived the life that he wanted to live, not the way the world told him he should live. The world told Big Frank, "You're a city boy. You can't make it farming in Kimball, Minnesota. You just don't do that." Big Frank said differently. When he went to start having children, mathematically, there is no way you could have 9 boys in a row. But Big Frank did it. When he came to Kimball and he started buying up this ground that was full of trees and full of hills and water that most farmers said, "You can't make a living on that kind of ground." That's what the world kept telling him, and Big Frank said, "I can and I will." And probably most importantly, Big Frank knew how to raise a family. The world says, when you raise 9 sons and they get married, there is no way those 9 sons will be married forever to those first wives. Big Frank said differently. He said, you raise a family right, treat them with the right values, marriages can last and should last forever.
One thing Big Frank and we all have a little bit of Big Frank in us, some more than others. One thing he and I had in common was why we love our families and we like to talk about them. And Big Frank had that unique capability of being able to work with each and every grandkid and have their own special relationship with that grandkid.
He had a family legacy that he wants to go on to prosper from generation to generation. And the way he did it, he was honest. He worked hard. He didn't give up. You know, he's generous, is the whole thing, but he did it with that fun, smile, laughter, charming. Any stranger could see it. It was a special gift he had that it was unbelievable.
To meet Big Frank was to remember Big Frank.
I had so many comments from so many cattle people across the whole country. It was just amazing.
And I mean, he truly loved it so much, rolling around in this truck, looking at those guys working. From the brothers, the grand, the great, all. I mean, I just couldn't believe how much he loved that. He stayed a part of that farm right to the end.
He was in the hospital, I know, Friday and Saturday. Called him up Saturday morning and told him, I said, yeah, everything's going with my knee replacement, but you're not here, and we can't have 2 Franks gone from the morning meeting. And he goes, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He said, I'll be home Sunday. And sure enough, he did his best to be home Sunday.
And Big Frank had to be exact. But the morning he died, I was in his office, and we went through several transactions of cattle. And he wasn't feeling the best. And I told him we did this and that. And he was trying to write them down. And I said, you got it? Can you balance all that out for me? And he goes, I think so. And then I left. And then Stacy is the one that came to find me, and we found him on the floor. And I brought Mom in the house, and I went to his desk. And there on the desk was every one of those numbers balanced to the T, to the penny.
If all the way till 90 years old, he was sharp as a tack. He said very simply, and I want you to digest this because I think it's just absolutely profound. He said, the only thing that can tear this nation apart, bring it down, or bring a family down, is from fighting from within. If you stick together, both as a country and a family, the opportunities are boundless.
reading from the book of James. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for his precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. A reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. He has made everything beautiful in its time.
There's no doubt Dad would be really proud and happy about this whole event. I know, a heart of hearts, that right now he's got the best view of the place. He's up there in heaven. He's sitting next to my brother Fuzz and my nephew Butch. They're all on 3 old tractors that don't need to be pulled to get started. They just start on their own. And he's saying, you know what? Schiefelbein humor lives on. It's something I personally will never forget and always appreciate, is that humor and that wit he had.
He said, Rod, do you know what the difference between a good haircut and a bad haircut is? And right away I thought, why these questions? I don't know math. This is probably a math question. So I answered him. I said, no, Big Frank, what's the difference between a good haircut and a bad haircut? He said, about 3 days. That made me feel pretty good. Navisto's haircuts, Big F.
He was always Big Frank to me. I didn't quite hit the Big F stage. And as I became an adult and I started traveling through the Dakotas in Montana, no matter where I went, people knew Big Frank. It didn't matter if I was in the middle of nowhere with no cell service, miles from the nearest town. Frank had been there before me, and they remembered him. The thing that started to stand out with all of these people, whenever they mentioned Big Frank's name, they always smiled. And it didn't matter if it was the worker behind the Casey's counter or a waitress in the middle of nowhere at a steakhouse. They remembered him and they smiled. And looking back at my own life then, I realized whenever Big Frank was in somebody's day, that person's day was just a little bit better.
And thank all you guys for coming to celebrate one great man.